Good morning, football fans. Chris here. Going to be talking some Week 5 NFL here. We're going to wait for a few more people to come in. I'm just going to share this here, make sure that everyone is in, and then we will kick things off. Talk about some Week 5. We're going to first go over fan share tags. I've added that to the sheet. I've added a few things to the sheet this week, so we're going to go over that here quickly. I've had some questions in chat, what it's all about. Hey, KCC, good morning. I hope you're having a good morning so far. I had to, just for a little bit better internet, I had to shut the Giants and Packers game off. So keep me updated in chat here, what's going on for lineups and stuff like that. But first of all, we are going to go over the fan share stuff here. So for anyone that's not familiar or hasn't heard yet, I have taken a little bit of a role. Me and Dane both are working on some PGA stuff for FanShare Sports. I've also been doing some curation for FanShare as well. So I'm just going to bring that up here, the FanShare Sports website, and just show you a little bit about it. So what it is they curate data from around the industry each and every week. You can find that data actually by going, and it is free over here you can actually come and check out the news feed. School Chad, morning John, welcome everybody. So yeah, if you come over to the NFL and you go to news feed here, this is a free option. This is where all the data comes from. So these are articles, YouTube videos, tweets, podcasts from around the industry. And what I do is I go through and I listen to these all, read all these articles, listen to all the podcasts, go through Twitter and find all the information, stats, anything that's relevant to DFS ownership that's going to sway people one way or the other. So what you're going to see here, this is all, if you scroll through all of this is all the data that I go through each and every week, whether it be tweets, like I said, articles. You can click on all these and check them out. If you want to come through and read a whole bunch of extra articles, it's a great place to go if you're looking to do extra research, looking for extra articles, podcasts to add to your list each and every week. But this is where the curated info comes from. This isn't everything. So when this comes up, and I'm going to go to the FanShare Pro tab here now, and I'm going to show you, so tags, generates tags. So every time I go through on the news feed, which I will bring up on a separate tab just to show you here, scrolling down and looking at this stuff, you'll see these players. These are the players that are mentioned either in green, for good, or looking at red for like a start sit sort of thing. That each time those are generated, that's going to generate a tag for those players. So when you flip back over to the FanShare Pro and you're looking at the tag counts every week, that's what you're going to see. That is part of the process for generating the DK projected ownership, FanDuel projected ownership that you're going to see over here in the DKPO and the FDPO tabs. That is only part of it. So we also look at past weeks ownership projections, where they went over the last 4 weeks of the season, where ownership fell on those players. As well as matchups, as well as a whole bunch of other things that go into the formula to do the actual projected ownership. And you're going to find that under, you need a membership to be able to see that. That is under the paywall. You can get 20% off also through Jagerbaum's Fantasy Sports using promo code Jager. You're going to get you 20% off of your NFL subscription there as well. So if you want to go check that out. But moving back over to the cheat sheet here, those tag counts I've added over to my cheat sheet. I'm going to keep that up for a few weeks here. And it kind of gives you a direction when looking at my cheat sheet where the ownership is probably going to fall. Morning, Bob. So we're going to look at that here a little bit this morning. Let's start off by looking at some of the matchups. A little bit different, bigger spreads here this week and not as high as totals as we've seen in the past. Like our highest total here is Philadelphia, Arizona at 49. Then we're going to look at the main slate only here. We've got the Chargers in Cleveland at 47. And Atlanta, Tampa Bay at 46.5, Detroit, New England, 45.5, Miami Jets at 45, Seattle, New Orleans at 45, and Pittsburgh, Buffalo at 45.5. So a lot of those mid-tier totals here this week. And we got some big spreads. Tampa Bay is a 10-point favorite. Jacksonville is a touchdown favorite. Minnesota's is minus 7.5 favorite at home versus Chicago. Buffalo is a 14-point favorite versus Pittsburgh. So it kind of adds to some decision-making here this week in terms of where to go in terms of cash games, which we'll talk about first here. So I'm just going to quickly go through each and every tab here, and we're going to look at some of the highest tag players this week around the industry, kind of where the chalk's going to fall, and then maybe talk about some pivots. And then we're going to build some lineups here as well. Before I do that, I want to I'll talk about the new stats that I've added to the sheet once I get to the wide receiver and tight end tab. So moving over to the quarterbacks here, what we see, we got Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts here at the top. They're both over 8K on DraftKings, 8,600 and 9,000 on FanDuel. Josh Allen, the 14-point favorite. I think we can still turn to him in cash games, and he is a very popular, been tagged a lot here. Jalen Hurts, probably going to be a little bit lower owned, although the tags are up for Jalen Hurts. It looks like our ownership projections over at FanShare have Allen a little bit higher than Hurts. And then probably your most popular today is going to be Tom Brady. Just the price at 6K makes a lot of sense. I don't think we can judge a lot of what we've seen with Brady early on in the season, just simply because he didn't have all his weapons. Well, he's got Godwin and Evans back. We've seen what happened there last week with that. We'll go bring up Brady here. I'm just going to bring him up on DraftKings, and we'll have a quick look at that. Loading quite slow. Brady at 6K. So yeah, he 52 pass attempts last week, 75%, really good rate. Completed 39 passes, 385 yards and 3 touchdowns, 29.4 DK. So you're kind of looking at that 5X last week for him. I don't think we necessarily see that, but we know that upside is there. I'm not really taking into account these 11, 10, 4, even that 14.7 in week 3. Like I said, he's got his weapons back now, and he's only 6K. It gives you a 2K difference on Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. So it makes a lot of sense to maybe turn to Brady in cash games here today. 10-point favorite, but again, I think there's some Atlanta pieces. Maybe they could keep it close, at least up until the fourth quarter, where Brady's going to at least keep throwing that ball, get upwards of that. Like on DraftKings, we're looking for that 300+ yard bonus. So we'd like to see that again. And again, we've got Godwin and Evans out there. We are missing Cameron Brate today, but that does open up a tight end in Cade Otton. I think we can maybe use as a punt play in cash games. There is some other, we'll get to that when we get to tight ends. Moving over to some other popular quarterbacks here. Trevor Lawrence is getting some buzz around the industry at 5,600 going up against Houston. A little more expensive on FanDuel. Probably not considering him over there. But on DraftKings, I think it makes sense at 5,600. Zay Jones is going to be back. He's got Christian Kirk over there. He's got James Robinson, Travis Etienne, good pass-catching running backs there as well. So I think he can get there at the 5,600. We're only maybe looking for about 15 points from him. I think that is totally doable. Then we got Teddy Bridgewater, who's filling in for Tua today. He's been getting a lot of buzz at only 5,400. He's not, I don't think he has the same upside as Tua. I think he generates and provides us with a nice floor, just simply because he's got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, who are both top 5 in yak yards this week, or not this week, this season. So he doesn't necessarily need to bomb it down the field, although we'll probably see that 2 or 3 times here today against the Jets. But I think he provides us a nice floor. Just having those players that he can throw short passes to that can generate a lot of yardage after the catch, something that we're definitely looking at here as well. Okay, moving on to the running back position. We'll start up at the top. I don't think a lot of people are going to be paying up in cash games as much, maybe for one, and it's kind of going to be between Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, and Austin Eckler. I think are going to be your 3 most popular options. Derrick Henry, the projected ownerships have him a little bit higher than both of Chubb and Eckler. I'm not sure it's going to play out that way. We're going to have to wait and see, just simply because he's got the toughest matchup by far. Washington, if they're good at one thing on defense, it is stopping the run. So Henry is more of a GPP play for me today. I don't think I'm going to be trusting him in cash, although we don't really have to worry about the volume with him. He's getting 21 touches per game. He's also been involved in the passing game lately as well, which is kind of a little bit of a bonus for him, especially on DraftKings and full PPR. Nick Chubb makes a lot of sense. The Chargers have been absolutely terrible against running backs. So has Cleveland on the opposite side. So you got, I think, one of those running backs in that game is going to be someone that people are going to turn to. Probably Eckler on DraftKings, Chubb over on FanDuel, just simply because it's more touchdown dependent over on FanDuel, and Chubb provides just that. He is second in the league behind behind Jamal Williams in terms of rushing touchdowns. He gets a lot of work around the goal line, although Kareem Hunt does too. He does steal that away, but Chubb has been the better back for sure there. Eckler catches the ball a little bit more. He finally had his explosive game last week with 3 touchdowns, and he's heavily involved. He's got an 18% target share, only behind Christian McCaffrey in terms of running backs and target share in their own offenses. But I think some popularity this week. Someone was saying it's been like 3 years, and this is the lowest price Alvin Kamara has been on DraftKings since I think it was 2018, late 2018 or something like that. He's getting a lot of buzz, I think, going up against Seattle, who is second He's given up the third most fantasy points to running backs. I think Kamara is going to see a lot of ownership today. James Robinson, talked about him a little bit with Jacksonville. He's got 20 tags going into this morning, going up against Houston as a 7-point favorite here as well. Always like running backs and favorites get that game script where they're up. They may get, an extra 5% in terms of rushing attempts towards the end of the game. And then going down, two very popular options, actually three we'll talk about. First of all, you're going to have to decide between the New England running backs. And this kind of comes down to what you feel for game script. Ramondre Stevenson, Damian Harris are getting a lot of buzz. Detroit is absolutely terrible against the run. Go look at their stats here. Yeah, they are dead last in terms of defense and dead last in terms of rushing defense and have allowed the second most fantasy points to running backs. So those New England running backs are both in play. Harris gets a little bit more of the run, as you can see, in terms of red zone opportunities. He's out red zoning opportunities over Stevenson 11-3. So that's pretty big there. He's also getting 5 targets, while Stevenson hasn't got any targets inside the red zone. So while we always think of Stevenson as maybe the pass catching backs, Harris has been a lot more involved in terms of the red zone. So comes down to game script, although when we look at overall targets, it's 11-7 in terms, 14-9 in terms of targets, 12% to 8% in terms of target share. For me, Harris is slightly ahead of Stevenson. And in my, say, 20 max build, I'm probably going to be split on those two about 60-40, maybe even closer to 70-30 in terms of Harris over Stevenson. Another popular option, Jeff Wilson Jr. for San Francisco. They are a 6.5-point favorite. It's a lower total here, but Wilson is getting like the lion's share of the work in the San Francisco backfield. So I do see him a little bit underpriced here at 5,500. I thought maybe we'd see him more in the 6K range with some of these guys that are maybe sharing the ball a little bit more. So the fact that he's got an elite defense, which is probably going to generate him more time with the ball, and he's getting the majority of the rushes and targets, just total touches in that San Francisco backfield, I think is going to make him a pretty popular choice today. Breece Hall's getting a lot of love here. He's right there in tags with those running backs that we just discussed down here. This 5K range is absolutely loaded. So if you want to load up on wide receiver today, I don't think getting, and we'll move over to that very shortly, I don't think it's going to be very hard if you start looking at these mid-tier running backs. And that's kind of why I feel that Henry, Chubb, Eckler are going to come in probably around that 8 to 10%, maybe even 5 to 10% range, not really that high in terms of ownership. Christian McCaffrey could turn into being, I won't have any Christian McCaffrey today, but he's going to be super low owned if you feel that he's going to get heavily involved, maybe that 20 plus touches. That's, if you're doing a game stack, a low owned game stack, you maybe want Christian McCaffrey in there because he's pretty much their opportunity to keeping that game close. Going a little bit lower, I do like Raheem Mostert, who's kind of taken over in the Miami backfield. It also probably gets you away from a chalky Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle there as well. He's been getting a lot of work in the red zone as well, 5 rush attempts. Like I said, he's been taking over a little bit more from Edmonds, and also very cheap. I don't think he's going to be very high owned here either this week, and that kind of moves us over into wide receivers. I want to talk about the stats that I've added here. First of all, over on the advanced stats tab, I've now got total air yards for the season. Then we've got average yak yards, but then I've got air yards plus yak yards. And this is more of an upside stat that I'm going to be looking at here each and every week. It kind of gives you the combination of who's getting, air yards is how many yards before they catch the ball. So guys with a lot of air yards are obviously getting targeted, and it's going to correlate a lot with your ADOT, average depth of target. But then we're going to combine that with yak yards. So not only who's getting the ball downfield, but who is creating yards after the catch as well. So that just creates a lot of upside. So we're going to be looking at those players. Obviously, these guys at the top are high priced for a reason. Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp. Oh, Barkley to the locker room. Thanks, Steve. I appreciate the update there. Had him in my showdown lineup, so that pretty much ends that. Appreciate the update. Cooper Kupp, I think that is where, like I said, with those lower to mid-tier running backs that we can load up on that are getting heavy usage in great spots, I think it's not going to be too hard to pay up for one of these guys. I think Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill are going to be your most popular options. We have seen Stephon Diggs a lot of times in these high spreads, which the Bills are 2-touchdown favorites here, where maybe they don't turn to Diggs. Diggs isn't really having his upside games. And at these prices, you're looking at almost 20 points you're going to need for these guys. Cup, you're going to need like 25 points. He's definitely getting the target share, so that would be the one that I'd be paying up for first of all. Then Tyreek Hill, who I think is going to be a nice kind of a blanket option here for Teddy Bridgewater. Get in those, give it to him like 5 yards from the line of scrimmage and let him just kind of get those yak yards. And if we go look at those yak yards, he is the leader here in terms of, well, first of all, air yards, and then the air yards plus the yards after the catch, 477 on the season. So definitely my second option. And then Stephon Diggs would be, and Jefferson are very close. I think Jefferson's going to come in the lowest owned of these four. I think that's going to create a nice leverage spot if you're building a lot of GPP lineups. And I don't think you're going to need a whole bunch. If you're building 20 max, I think you can probably go ahead and maybe only put Jefferson in like 2 or 3 lineups, and you're going to be like at least double the field there. Deebo Samuel gets a lot of rush attempts in there as well. I think he could maybe come in a little bit lower on, but maybe like a Deebo and Jeff Wilson go together quite well. You're going to get like all the rushing attempts. You're also going to get Deebo in the passing game there as well. Moving down, we got AJ Brown with Philly, correlates very highly with Ertz. Mike Williams, I don't think he's going to be high owned. He's only got 12 tags here. The ownership projection's kind of down. I want to go over and we will check out the wide receiver position. In terms of ownership, we'll pop this up here today. We'll sort by ownership projection, and then I'm just going to go ahead and search Mike Williams. Yeah, Cooper Kupp, Chris Godwin, Olave is getting, he's number 1 in tags this week. Christian Kirk. So as we see, Jefferson is down around 7%, and Mike Williams will be, he's down here even more, like 5%. If that turns out to be true, Mike Williams at 5%, I'm definitely going to load up. I'll talk about that in my top stacks here once I get through all these positions, but definitely going to be on my radar here. Christian Kirk, like I said, is getting a lot of love. He's just been super consistent in this Jacksonville offense. Trevor Lawrence definitely likes going to Kirk. Godwin just seems way too cheap. If you're going with Tom Brady, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans, which it's going to be odd here. Like for GPPs, I'm going to have a mix of double stacks with Brady, and I'll talk about stacks a little bit more as we build out a couple lineups here. But Evans is going to be lower owned just because it's $1,000 difference on DraftKings, $500 difference on FanDuel. So Godwin's going to get the ownership here for sure. So Evans kind of makes a little bit of a leverage play if you're going with a lot of Brady stacks here as well. Chris Olave with Mike Thomas out makes a lot of sense. Also with New Orleans, scrolling down. I'll just search it. Oops. Now I need to. Marquise Callaway is who I'm trying to find here. There we go. Hasn't got a lot of a buzz around the industry, but he's a punt play that I'll definitely consider at the wide receiver position with Michael Thomas out of the lineup here. But going back up, Chris Olave and Godwin and Kupp. If you're paying up, it's Kupp. If you're coming down here and looking for ownership, it's going to be Godwin and Olave that are going to be chalk. There's definitely going to be some leverage off of those guys. I think Drake London, first of all, if you want to find some leverage just in that Tampa Bay Atlanta game alone, I think you can pair Brady with Mike Evans. It's going to get you some leverage off of Godwin. And then going with Drake London to run it back is going to get you some leverage just down here in this high 5K range on DraftKings. I like London a little bit more even on FanDuel at 6,200. Nice price tag there on him. He's been getting a lot of the target share, 34%. I think I seen something. There was like 2 or 3 wide receivers that have ever had as much target share in their offense as he has. So he's been a very impressive rookie. So that gives you some leverage there off of that chalk. Devontae Smith here. AJ Brown is probably going to be the most popular choice to put with Hurts. I do like Devontae Smith here as well. Brandon Cooks, if you're going with that Jacksonville stack today, running it back with Cooks, that's a nice mid-tier. It's going to save you some money in terms of your stacks there. We'll put some of that together as well. Robert Woods today, Treylon Burks was put on IR, so that makes a lot of sense going with Robert Woods for Tennessee because Washington is, and I mean, if Derrick Henry starts seeing some ownership, and if you do feel like he's going to be high owned, I definitely like Robert Woods here as a nice cheap wide receiver, as Washington has been way worse, second most fantasy points to wide receivers, while they are 5th in terms of fantasy points to running backs. Garrett Wilson would be my favorite option if you're going with the Jets. He's been the most consistent wide receiver for them. Second most consistent has actually not even been Elijah Moore. It has been I know he's right here as well. Corey Davis. Looking at Corey Davis specifically, 10, 4, 5, and 6 targets. He's had 74 plus yards in 3 of his 4 games. He's had touchdowns in 2 of his last 3 and double digits. So 14 fantasy points, 13.7, but 14 fantasy points or more in 3 of those 4 games as well. So that's kind of in that 3X range, and that is excellent for cash. He's just been super consistent. Elijah Moore is kind of my third option if you're looking at the Jets today. Moving over to tight end, I've got that same air yards plus yak yards in here as well. TJ Hawkinson just went way up that board after last week. He went absolutely off. I think a lot of people are going to be chasing that this week, and I have really no problem with that. New England is 27th in fantasy points to tight ends. Other popular options at the top, and we don't really have the elite guy up there this week. 2 elite guys in Kelsey or Mark Andrews. George Kittle is going to be super low owned. If you're looking for like a McCaffrey and Kittle, you want to pair those 2, you're looking at a super low owned contrarian lineup there. If you want to start a GPP lineup in the Millie Maker or something like that, I won't be doing any of that. I don't build enough lineups to kind of get there. But if you're building, say, 50, 100, 150 lineups in those big contests, that is one way to get leverage off the field for sure. It's going to be super low owned, but Zach Ertz is going to make a lot of sense going up against Philly. If you want to run your Philly, you're going to need to run your Philly stacks back. If Philly blows it out, we have seen the stat, and I wish I had the tweet up here, where Jalen Hurts has been absolutely going off in the first half. He's averaging like 28 DK points per game in the first half and only like 18 in the second half. That's mainly because they're blowing teams out. And just they're running the ball a lot more in the second half. That's where Miles Sanders has really come in. So if you think Arizona can stay close and you maybe want to run that back, you want to get the Jalen Hurts ceiling game where he goes off in the second half, which I don't think we've seen that because of those stats for sure. You maybe want to run Hurts, one of his wide receivers, or maybe even double stack it. Then you can run that back with Zach Ertz, who's been getting a lot of love in the red zone. 10 red zone targets, by far is ahead of all tight ends. 43.5% red zone usage for him, just for Arizona there. Dallas Goedert for Philly has been getting close to the most tags, but I think for cash game, the play highest owned guy here is going to be Tyler Higbee. He's been getting heavy, almost 26% target share this season, which is really high. 9.5 targets per game. 26 receptions, so only 68% catch rate, but still, that's just a lot of volume for him. And in terms, I don't think we have to love the Rams offense whatsoever. We've seen that on Monday Night Football. It's been absolutely terrible. What we did see, what we can pull from that game is that Higbee and Cooper Kupp they're just heavily owned. They had like 32 targets between the 2 of them in that game. So no matter what the game script's going to be, Stafford is going to those 2 over and over and over and over. Allen Robinson has been the forgotten man. Same with the running game a little bit as well. Some other cheaper guys going down the board. Gerald Everett's been getting some love here. If you're looking at the Chargers, Tyler Conklin's been super consistent for the Jets. David Njoku hasn't been the most consistent, but he has shown a ton of upside, especially 2 weeks ago. Dalton Schultz has been talked about quite a bit here. Irv Smith is a cheap guy, not really on him. He hasn't really shown me even a solid floor, let alone any upside. Juwan Johnson, no one really wants to play him anymore. He had that good week, followed it up with 2 couple bad weeks. So not really interested in that, but I think, GPP, we could go to that as kind of a punt play. And then talked about him a little bit before. He hasn't got a lot of love in terms of the tag counts, but I know he's probably going to see some ownership here down in the $2,500 range. Cade Otton for Tampa Bay. He got 4 targets last week. And we know how Tom likes to go to his tight ends, especially in the red zone. He caught 3 for 4 for 29. That's 6 points. I mean, that is over 2x for him for sure. So I think we can go there. And then if he does end up getting ownership, I think you can actually pivot off and go up to OJ Howard for Houston. Kind of gets you into that Houston-Jacksonville game stack as well. He plays for the Giants, Gary Brightwell. I was like, who in the hell is that? Thanks, Steve. So that covers the tight end position. Then looking at defense, Buffalo Bills, if you're paying up, I'll get that London and Thursday Night Football game out of there. Buffalo, if you're paying up, makes sense going up against Pittsburgh. One matchup that stands out when we start looking at the D-line versus O-line comparison here, stands out a ton, is the San Francisco 49ers. They've got 15 sacks on the season, while Carolina's given up 11 sacks. 3rd in adjusted sack rate, while the Carolina O-line is 28th in adjusted sack rate. That is a huge plus 25 there. The only other one that really stands out in terms of that is Dallas. why Dallas's price dropped to 2,500. They were super cheap and chalky 2 weeks ago. Their price went up into the $3,000 range last week. They were a little bit lower owned. Again, they've got the number one adjusted sack rate in terms of defensive line, 15 sacks, while the Rams have given up 16. They're 29th in adjusted sack rate on the O-line, which is a plus 28. That's the highest we've seen, I believe, this season. So the Cowboys are going to be your chalk defense, which I think is fine for cash games. That's where you're going to go for cash games. We've talked about this in the past. Defense is there's a lot of variance in the defensive scoring. So in GPPs, I like to get away from the chalk defense. And to do that, I'm going to go to Seattle, who's just right below them here. And what I like about it here, while Seattle's only got 7 sacks in the season, they're 25th in adjusted sack rate. New Orleans O-line is 25th in adjusted sack rate. They've given up 13 sacks this season. Andy Dalton is under center, I believe, today. Last I seen, Winston was doubtful. I don't think it's official yet, but he was doubtful. So it's going to be Andy Dalton. I could see, getting sacked 2 or 3 times. And then we got turnovers. New Orleans has turned the ball over 11 times, which leads all teams on this slate. So I think there's some upside with the Seattle defense, and I think they're going to be half or even more the ownership of the Dallas Cowboys. So I definitely like that. New England makes a little bit of sense here, and not in terms of sacks, although New England is 7th in their defensive line in terms of adjusted sack rate. The Detroit offensive line has been very impressive this season, ranking 2nd in adjusted sack rate. So I'm not really thrilled about going there. One that I would go to here, though, is the Tennessee Titans. They're facing Carson Wentz. That's about enough. That's about all we have to say about that. Wentz is going to get sacked. He's been sacked 17 times. He gives up turnovers. He's given up 7 turnovers here, and they are 30th in adjusted sack rate this season. So Tennessee would be the mid-tier. Dallas is going to be the chalk in the low-end range. Seattle is going to be my pivot down there. And then I don't think a lot of people, just because of the Dallas ownership and even the Tennessee ownership, that we're probably going to see the San Francisco 49ers. And I know a lot of people have been talking about the Vikings versus Chicago. The only reason I don't like that is the Vikings are going to need to get 4 or 5 sacks to make that pay off. I don't think we're going to see a lot of turnovers for Chicago. They run the ball too much. If we go look at the actual matchup and run rate, they only throw it 33% of the time. That really limits the interceptions that you can get. So the upside is kind of limited. And the fact that they're that high priced, I'm just not interested when they're running the ball 67% of the time. All right, so that kind of covers all the positions. It covers the new stats. And like I said, the question in chat was, what do the fan share tags mean? Every single tag that you see on here, and this hasn't been updated in a couple hours now, but generally I'm watching the shows first thing in the morning as well on Sundays, so I'm trying to get some more tags in there. But every time you see a tag on a player, that's just a podcast, a video, an article, a tweet, talking about a player, talking about stats, that sort of thing. Now, in terms of building stacks, I talked about this a little bit last week. I'm going to talk about it again. NFLsavant.com. It's a free site. Let's blow this up so you can see it. So a couple things that you can do here is you can choose a team. If you're looking to double stack and you want to say, let's go back to, we're going to talk about Tampa Bay, which is going to be tough to look at just because they've had injuries. So if we want to look at a team that maybe hasn't, we're going to go to the Chargers here, actually, and we're going to go to targets, and you can kind of see where the target share falls just for that team. Mike Williams, Austin Eckler, kind of splitting, and then you got Gerald Everett, Josh Palmer. So that's, you can kind of look and see the percentage and stuff like that, who you want to stack with. A really good team to look at is actually going to be Atlanta. We'll go to the Falcons because they're probably got the most concentrated target percentage to the 2 players. That's Drake London and Kyle Pitts. Well, Kyle Pitts is out, so we're going to see a lot of Drake London. He's probably going to see, I'm going to guess somewhere in the 40 to 50% target range here this week. So I do like running London back in the Tampa Bay stacks, and that's where we're going to kind of go start here. Is with Brady, Godwin, and London. And then if you go down and you grab, now this is going to be more cash. We'll grab the chalky Dallas defense. We're going to go down and we're going to talk about these running backs. I think we're going to see Jeff Wilson Jr. as a chalky running back. And then let's just go with Damian Harris here, who has that touchdown upside versus a terrible Detroit rushing defense. So that leaves us 6,200. Talked about, you could either go Tyler Higbee as the chalk guy here. 4,300 makes a lot of sense. That leaves you 7,000 extra in a cash lineup where you can come and pay up for one of these receivers. I think, yeah, we can even get Cooper Kupp in there with that lineup if we want, or we can come down and go. I really like this high end 6, low end 7K range. You can really come and grab, I don't think we need to go Mike Williams maybe in cash. You could double stack with Brady if you wanted to, because we do have the run back. Anytime I'm doing a double stack with one team, I will run it back with someone from the other side because they're going to need to keep it close. The double stack just isn't going to work. It's not going to be in the optimal. So keep that in mind. I don't think we need to run it back necessarily. So we don't need to go Drake London if we don't want to. If we're running cash games here, I don't think we need to run it back there. If we're just running Brady with one of his receivers, which would be Godwin, that still leaves us that 6,700 average. We could easily go Cooper Kupp. Other guys that we talked about, Olave down here, that's leaving you 4,900 in your flex. For cash games, you could go double tight end. I'm not really looking at that for cash games, so I definitely want to move things around here. Another note is Brian Robinson is back for Washington here today. I didn't mention that in the running backs. He's only going to be getting about 20 snaps. Is kind of the pitch count they got him on today. Sorry for the baseball reference. But they've got him running about 20 snaps today. So I won't be running him, but what this does create for GPPs, if you want, I'm going to clear this out because that's kind of my cash core right there, if you will, is I will be for GPPs. I think we can get Antonio Gibson at like 2% ownership today. I think Washington's going to keep this game close with Tennessee. He gets a ton of usage around the goal line in the red zone. He's a good pass catching running back. He's been very solid. He hasn't really given us that big yardage game yet, but he has shown us that 20-point upside. And like I said, he's going to be 2% owned with the news that Brian Robinson is coming back. But with him being on a snap count, I think we can get a lot of leverage there. Again, if you're building 20-plus lineups, 50, 150, if you're kind of in that milli maker type of tournaments and you're looking for super leverage, I think that's another player we can get really, really low ownership with. And you can mix with some of those chalk plays to really separate your lineups from everyone else. Another stack that I wrote about in my DFSR article, I'm just going to share a couple of those notes here or article links with you. All right, so this is my GPP stacks article for week 5. Make sure to go check it out over at dfsr.com. I write up a few stacks every week, and a couple of them are ugly. You're really not going to like it. This one, not so much. I'll start out with one that I really, really like that I think is going to be low owned just because we're going to see a lot of ownership on Josh Allen and Hurts. Maybe not so much on Josh Allen and Hurts necessarily, but I think the ownership will be there with those stacks. They're going to be some of the highest owned stacks. So I think I like going with Herbert a lot here. I talked about Mike Williams probably not being too low owned. The problem, and I think the reason why this stack is going to be a little bit lower owned is just simply because it's expensive. Because if you want to run it back, I think you have 2 options, maybe even 3. I like running it back with Chubb in a game script where he's getting 20 to 25 touches, 100 yards, multiple touchdowns. Going up against a bad Chargers rush defense, 23rd in fantasy points to running backs. Chubb has actually been he's only got 5 targets less than Kareem Hunt this year, so I definitely like that. He's got big time upside. The problem with this stack now is it's very expensive, so you're going to have to go down and get some cheap players. So this is where I'd maybe want to run the Seahawks. This is maybe where you want to get some exposure to Cade Otton for Tampa Bay. It gives you some, if he gets in there and gets, again, 3 for 4, he gets his 30 to 40 yards and maybe catches a touchdown this week, he's going to crush that $2,500 price tag. Gives you that leverage off of maybe if Godwin and Evans don't get the touchdowns or, Otton steals one of those touchdowns from those guys. I think that gets you some leverage there. And then if you want to still get a piece of that Buffalo offense, say they blow it out, Diggs is, maybe only gets his 10 to 12 points. Josh Allen, we've already got some leverage off of Josh Allen with Justin Herbert. We can go even further with that and go plug in Devin Singletary at 6,100. This is a core I definitely like. Now we're all the way back up to that 5,500 average. So there's a couple things that we can do here. I talked about Callaway. If you want to go down and punt and get back up into that high 6K, I would call it my favorite range in terms of wide receivers, because now you've got Godwin, London, Curtis Samuel, you got Brandon Cooks, Kirk, Metcalf, Evans. You got all these guys you can now plug into your lineup. So that is a stack core that I definitely like as well. And then another one, which is really ugly. No one wants to play this whatsoever. First of all, I'm not worried about Wentz too much. If we go look at these last 2 weeks, he's played very tough defenses in Philly and Dallas, probably top 3 defenses in the league. He's only put up 9 fantasy points in each of those. No one wants to play him. We know he's got upside, that 30-point upside. And a 30-point upside, you're looking at 5X. That is optimal lineup. GPP winning upside, 100%. So getting him at like 5% or less, I think that makes a lot of sense. No one wants to play Terry McLaurin. I like it a little bit more because Dotson is out this week. And we know that Wentz is not afraid to throw it downfield. And if we go look specifically at McLaurin here and look at his advanced stats, the one that stands out to me the most is his ADOT, which is average depth of target. Plus, he's got 177 air yards, 250 air yards plus yards after the catch as well. But he's getting targeted well down the field, kind of not as much as Chris Olave has, but it's definitely there. I like seeing upside in guys that are, 12 plus average depth of target. So McLaurin definitely makes sense. And then we go look at, I'll show you how I use this NFL Savant. So custom stats you go to, I'm looking at, we want deep passes for upside. So I go deep, right, middle, and left. I want to go 2022. I want to go play results, completions. We want to look at the defenses, and we want to look at yards. So what we're targeting here to look at is teams that give up the most yards on deep passes. This is 20 or more yards is what's considered a deep pass. Tennessee's number 2, 466 yards on deep passes. So that's something, this is how I kind of use this tool to distinguish when I'm looking at building GPP lineups and looking for upside. So it all just kind of ties together where I think we can really look at Wentz and McLaurin here. And then I like either running it back with Derrick Henry in a game script where Tennessee gets out ahead. Henry gets 20 to 25 touches. He gets his 100 yards and multiple touchdowns, kind of like we talked about with Chubb. And then we running it back. Well, not really running it back, but on the other side, we've got Carson Wentz, who's going to have to throw 40 or more passes again this week. He's got no Dotson to target in the end zone. And then we just talked about the upside with Tennessee giving up a ton of deep plays. I think Wentz can connect on 1 or 2 of those with McLaurin, and we're going to get super low ownership on this stack combination here. Again, I think we can run the Seahawks, or this is a spot where I think you don't have to worry about running the chalk as much, where you could run the Cowboys if you really wanted to and not have to worry about, Barkley touchdown. Thanks, John. Where you don't have to worry about the chalk as much because Wentz, Henry, and McLaurin are going to give you enough separation where you don't have to worry about the chalk defense. But pretty much the way I'm going to be running my defenses and GPPs this week is, if down at the bottom, if I'm paying down, it's going to be about 60-40, again, closer to 70-30 probably with Seahawks and Cowboys, just to get away from that ownership. But I will have a little bit of the Cowboys in there, just want to have a little bit less in the field, just in case, they're only going to get their 8 to 10 points and they're, 40% owned, like we've seen some of these cheap, awesome defenses get there in the past. Something else this does is we're probably going to want to go down to our cheaper running back tier again, which we talked about. This may be a spot where we want to get Ramondre Stevenson in there. We'll put him in there. You can go cheap tight end. I don't think you necessarily have to because Kittle's the only one over 5K this week. And because we've got Stevenson in there, I think we can also get some correlation by getting Hawkinson in there. I think New England wins this game, or at least controls it close to the end. And I want to go check on, I haven't seen the news on Amon-Ra yet. He is active. Okay, so that makes me a little bit lower on Hawkinson here. So I probably don't want to run him as much, but I think you could go Amon-Ra. Being that he's a late active, I don't think he's going to see a whole bunch of ownership. He is 7,600 though. So we could stick with Hawkinson if you want. But another route that I think we can go is possibly going with Zach Ertz and then getting Devonta Smith in there. That gives us some Philly, Arizona exposure. We've got that New England, Detroit exposure, and that kind of leaves us still at that 5,500 where we can go down and punt. And I talked about Callaway already. Another one that I think we can look at, I want to check on Isaiah McKenzie's status. He is inactive. Okay, so that makes me really like Shakir here as another punt. So Shakir and Callaway, I'm probably going to split as my 2 3K wide receivers, and that gets us back into 7,900 range for the flex. That gets us to Eckler, Debo, A.J. Brown. Probably going to go Eckler in that build. So there is a GPP build I like. Very low owned. It's going to be a contrarian for sure because we got a lot of lower owned players in there. And then another one, Jalen Hurts. I think we can go Brown or Devonta Smith. I really like Brown. And then I'm going to run that back with Zach Ertz. So that gets us that. You can double stack this as well. If you think this is a game where Arizona keeps it close, double stacking Hurts. Maybe he gets a rushing touchdown, 2 passing touchdowns. They both go to Smith and Brown. Ertz. What I like about Ertz a lot, we'll go over and look at his stats here. So he's got an 18% target share. He's catching 71% of his passes, 7.8 targets per week. Way over here in the red zone area, he's getting, like I said, a 43.5% target share in the red zone for Arizona. Already 10 red zone targets, leads the team, leads the league. And he's already got 2 touchdowns. So if he goes in there and gets a double touchdown, I don't even think he needs that. I think, at 4,800, we could probably look at something like the 75-yard range, which is already 15.5 points, 8 of 11. I think we can see a line like that, but you throw in another touchdown, he's in the 21-point range. You're looking at a 4x return from Ertz. I think this can be a very high upside stack. And again, back down to the cheap defenses, and then we're back down into the cheap running back range. I think Damian Harris makes sense. Again, probably going to get a lot of him. Jeff Wilson. This is another spot where I talked about Raheem Mostert. This gets you access to that Miami and Jets game. Very cheap. And it's going to be contrarian because I think a lot of people, and we're going to see a lot of the ownership on Waddle and Tyreek Hill. So this gets you exposure to that game with some leverage off those pass catchers, those expensive pass catchers, while we're going to a double stack with them. So that's some correlation that we can get there as well. I don't think we necessarily have to go Damian Harris. I'll leave that out. You can kind of choose between Singletary. Again, if we want to go very contrarian in this and still get some exposure to that Buffalo offense, Singletary is going to be lower owned, obviously, I think, than maybe Diggs, Gabe Davis. We talked about Shakir. That gets us into that 5,000 range. We can start building the rest of that out as well. So those are some of my favorite stacks and how I'm building them in terms of looking at the correlation and how to put them together. I've got about 15 of my 20 built so far with those exposure to those teams. That's kind of the route that I'm going. With the Brady one, again, I think you can double stack with Evans and Godwin together. And if you're doing that, I'm running it back with Drake London. I don't think if you're just running one of those wide receivers, you necessarily have to run it back with Drake London, but you definitely can. But looking at those, I'm probably going to have most of my exposure to the double stack, running it back with Drake London. And then I'm going to go back and have some Brady and Evans. Probably a little bit more Evans than Godwin, just simply because of ownership. I think we can get a little bit of leverage there, but I'm going to have a lot of exposure to that Tampa Bay offense today. A.J. Brown or Amon-Ra St. Brown. So A.J. Brown's going to be more – I definitely am leaning on A.J. Brown here. He's going to be a little bit higher owned, but if you're looking for leverage in GPPs, Amon-Ra, being that he wasn't announced active until this morning, makes a lot of sense. There's a little bit of leverage there. Would definitely want to run that back. And you could also double stack that back. If you could go, honestly, I think you could go be very contrarian, go Damian Harris and Ramondre. I wouldn't do this a whole bunch, but then you could run that back with Amon-Ra and Hawkinson. I spelled it right. That's going to be very contrarian, I think, there. But yeah, if it was just a 1v1 in like a 3 max or something, I'm going AJ Brown. 33JB, how viable do you think the game stack with Kyler is? Oh, yes, I wanted to talk about that. Okay, so for Philadelphia to not have the blowout, I think we're going to have to see Kyler have one of his ceiling games. So if you wanted to go with Kyler and Ertz and then run that back with AJ Brown, I think that is an excellent stack. And I think, keeping it close, I think this is one where you could possibly run in Sanders as well, 2 from each side. I don't think you necessarily need Sanders, but I think you could also run Devonta Smith and kind of double stack the Philly wide receivers without Hurts. and then go Kyler Murray, who's going to be a lot lower owned, a little bit of leverage there at quarterback, and get your touchdowns with Zach Ertz, AJ Brown, and Devontae Smith, or again, like I said, Miles Sanders in there as well. So I think that's a viable stack. It's probably fifth on my list. I like those other ones a little bit more, but definitely viable for sure. I'm going to try and get a piece of it. Again, I've got 15 of my 20 already built, so it's maybe going to run one of those just to have some exposure, or I'm just going to jam in more lineups here once I get off the show. All right. Any more questions? Throw them up. I wanted to go over my bet card here real quick, too. A couple games that I'm looking at. I think Steve's been waiting this whole time for my bet card. He asked this morning. I said I would talk about it on the show. So a couple that I'm looking at here this morning. Now, the line has already moved on Philly. It was -5. I like Philly -5.5. It's -102 right now. I also like the Chargers and Cleveland. They are I think if they were at home, they'd probably be close to 2.5-point favorite. Right now, they're a 1.5-point favorite on the road in Cleveland. I definitely like that Chargers -1.5 at -104 on the juice. Seattle +5.5 makes sense. I think the Seattle defense is going to, like I said, I like them for DFS. I think Seattle can hold. I don't know if they're going to outright win. That may be a little bit more of a contrarian and like a bigger parlay or something like that. But I do think Seattle holds New Orleans and Andy Dalton, which isn't a big stretch by any means, at least to keeping it close within a field goal. I don't think Andy Dalton's going to go out and crush the Seattle defense whatsoever. And Seattle, Geno Smith's looked really good. And his receivers with Metcalf and Lockett. Lockett has looked way better and way more consistent with Geno Smith than he has Russell Wilson. Well, now we can kind of see maybe why Russell Wilson was let out of town. Denver might be regretting that. I'm not completely sure on that, but I'm pretty sure they're regretting that, paying him $240 million. So I like Seattle +5.5 today. And then Tampa Bay -10. Atlanta has just got a horrible defense. We talked about Tom getting his weapons back. Evans and Godwin are healthy. I could see another 300-plus yard game, multiple touchdowns, close to 80-plus yards for both of these wide receivers in a touchdown. Julio is out. I think Gage is going to be in. Brait is out, and I think Otton is more of a DFS play, but I think Tampa Bay can cover that 10 points today. So those are the four I'm looking at. Again, that's Philly -5.5. That's Chargers -1.5. That is Seattle +5.5 and Tampa Bay -10. I'll be running each of those 1 unit, and then for a half unit, I'm going to put all four of those together in a parlay, and then I might even do some trebles, which is a combination of 3 of those, and I think that gets you 4 combinations of 3. No, sorry. I think that's 3 combinations. I don't know. Whatever the book shows me here, combinations of 3 is what a treble is. So kind of gives you an option where you can still make money if 3 out of 4 hit. Week 5 PPR, Deontay, Garrett Wilson, or Corey Davis. So PPR season long here. I'm probably going with Garrett Wilson. I have Deontay Johnson in the league, and I'm not sure what to do with him. I was excited preseason. He's getting a ton of targets. He's getting a ton of receptions. It's just the yards aren't there. He's not getting the yak yards. Garrett Wilson has been extremely consistent. So is Corey Davis. But I think we got to go Garrett Wilson, Deontay, and then Corey Davis for me in that scenario for sure. Right on. We've had 16 viewers here. I really appreciate it. We doubled, or actually tripled what we had last week, so I like that. I'll be back next week to talk some Week 6 stuff. I might even do a live show Monday night for the Monday Night Football Showdown. Stay tuned for that. I got a lot more stuff coming up over at Fanshare Sports in terms of videos and content. And again, if you want to go over and check out Fanshare, you can go check out the news feed for free. Just head over to fansharesports.com, go over to the news feed. If you're looking to do some research throughout the week, this is where you're going to find all the articles, YouTube videos, tweets that I find, any kind of relevant DFS data for DraftKings, FanDuel, even season-long stuff, start sits, that sort of thing. This is where you're going to find all of that information. Again, it is free. These are all the players that are tagged, and then you can get a subscription to Fanshare Sports using promo code Yeager, and you're going to get 20% off that as well. Thanks for tuning in. Let's go see some green screens, and I'll see you all on the Winning Picks channel later today. Cheers.